afternoon, and a guten Erev Shabbos. Let's light up the darkness with a new wisdom candle. We've gone through a lot of these, and at one point they come like 50 in a box, and I bought 4 boxes, like 200 of these candles, that last several classes. And I'm coming to the end of the 200 candles. Wow, we do this a lot. Thank God. Who's in the house on a Friday? Guy in Ohio, Gordo in Malta rather than Scotland. Welcome, Gordo. Joe in the Inland Empire. Sharon in New Jersey. Shandor in the Bronx. Karen in Northern California. Renee in Indiana. Just ordered the book. Thank you so much. Bella in Florida. Oh, my copy's inside. Yes, have I mentioned my new book, Let My People Laugh? Greatest Jewish jokes of all time. Nina will put the link in the comments. We are the #1 new release in jokes and riddles. I think #3 in ethnic and regional humor, something like that. And it'll be delivered November 26th, just in time for the holidays. You want to have a great joke at Thanksgiving. Such a good gift. Anybody with a sense of humor will love this book. It's the most useful joke book ever because all the jokes are numbered and there's lists of which jokes are great for various kinds of occasions. Get the book. Buy the gifts. Bella's in Florida. Blake, that's a new name. Welcome, Blake in Ohio. Marjorie in Georgia. Chaim in Florida. Aoife in Florida. Michael in Texas. Is that a new Michael? Welcome, Michael. And Joseph in Nevada. Welcome, everybody. Okay, starting a new Mishna here in chapter 9 of Tractate Bava Basra, the 23rd volume of the Talmud. What's today? The 1778th page out of 2711. We're making significant progress since we started in 2020. 2025 almost here. 2027, God willing, will complete our journey together. Okay, Mishnah number 3 here in chapter 9. In the case of one who died and left behind adult and minor sons, so they're all heirs, but there's adults and minors, these boys. If the adult sons enhanced the property, they enhanced it so that the profit goes to the middle, meaning it's distributed among all the heirs. If the adult sons said from the outset, see that which our father left behind, we're going to engage in business with our share of the property and profit from it, well, then they enhanced that portion of the inheritance for themselves. They didn't augment the whole estate. They set aside part of the estate, which will accrue to them once it's divided. They enhanced that. They invested. They somehow made it better. But they didn't do it for the benefit of all the heirs. They only did it for their own portions. And that's not such a bad thing because when you seek to enhance your property and make it better, there might be some risk involved also. And they didn't put the part of the estate that would go to the minors at risk. So they enhance the property for themselves. If they declared that they're enhancing for themselves, if they simply started enhancing the undivided property before it's broken up into shares, then the minors participate in that. And interestingly, if they did take a risk and then they ended up making the property worth less, perhaps the minors would have a claim and say, hey, we didn't agree that you could go and put the joint property at risk. So what you diminished from your own part, but you can't diminish our part because the court is always very protective of minors, especially minor orphans. Okay, and similarly, with regard to a wife who enhanced the property of her deceased husband, she enhanced it so that the profit goes to the middle, i.e., it is divided between her and the other heirs. If she said, see that which my husband left me, the portion of the inheritance that goes to me, I am going to engage in business with my share and profit from it. Then she enhanced that portion of the estate for herself, and whatever profit comes from it is for her. It doesn't affect the remainder of the estate. That's Mishnah number 3. Now the Gemara. Rav Chaviva, the son of Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, said in the name of Rava, they taught this law, this halacha, only with regard to where the property was enhanced on account of the property. What does that mean? The property enhanced on account of the property, i.e., the heirs invested money from the common inheritance in order to enhance the property, and their input was only in the management of its investment. But if the property was enhanced on their own account, i.e., on account of the efforts or expenditure of the adult sons, separate from what they inherited from the father, they invested that into that portion of the estate that they're inheriting, then the law is that they enhanced it for themselves, right? So if, let's say, the father left them a restaurant, okay, and then they're going to figure out later how they're going to divide up the restaurant, because maybe they don't want, maybe there's 3 brothers, maybe, right, 2 of them are adult sons, 1 is a minor, and at some point they might sell the restaurant, or one of them might decide to keep the restaurant and buy out the others, but they haven't figured that out yet. So right now the 3 of them have inherited a restaurant, and the restaurant, the father didn't really make any updates over the years, and they're thinking, this restaurant will bring in more customers and we'll make more money if we invest a little bit in the decor, redo the floors, get some better, newer, flashier signage outside. So if they, took from the existing profits of the restaurant or some savings account that they inherited along with the restaurant, and they use that to enhance the restaurant, so then clearly that's going to accrue to the benefit of all the sons. But on the other hand, if one of them said, but let's say there was no extra money in the restaurant, and the restaurant's pulling in barely enough money just to pay the waiters, and one of the brothers had some money of his own, and he invested that in the restaurant, well, he's not doing that out of the generosity of his heart unless he says he is, where it's just going to benefit all of them equally. He's saying, look, I'm putting in the investment. I want to get back what I put into it, and some kind, that enhancement is going to accrue to his share, even though the other ones will benefit anyway, because overall the restaurant is going to get better. But he's got to be compensated for the fact that he invested his own money into their jointly inherited restaurant. I'm just making that up as an example. Okay. The Gemara challenges this, right? That if the adult sons, use the money that's in the property to enhance the property, it accrues to the benefit of all the heirs. If they put in their own money, it accrues to their own benefit. The Gemara says, is that so? But doesn't Rabbi Hanina say, even if their father left them nothing but, I'm sorry, we picked it up at the bottom of 143b, now we're on page 144a. Even if their father left them nothing more than a mortar, right? Like a mortar and pestle, not a very big estate, but it's a kind of mortar that's not a small one, like a large mortar, and they make a little bit of money by renting out the mortar to people who need to come and grind, wheat or spices or whatever they're going to grind in it. So the rent, when people pay rent to use their mortar, the rent goes to the middle, meaning it's divided among all the brothers. But isn't the profit accruing from a mortar considered to be profit accruing on his, i.e. the adult son's own account? As it's let's say there's 1 adult son and 2 minors. So the older boy, the adult son, he's presumably now going to be engaged in administrating the use of the mortar, meaning when customers come to rent it, he's going to collect the money, clean the mortar after it's been used, etc. So he's running the business, and the assumption so far is that the minor sons are not involved in running the business, right? So then when we say that the profits coming in for the rent of this mortar accrue to his account, as the adult son must supervise its operation. And there is no outlay from the property. He's not reinvesting from the property, but he's the one that's collecting the rents. Shouldn't he get paid for that work? Maybe they divide the profits after he gets paid for the time he puts into it. But the Gemara dismisses this particular objection as a mortar is different. As for its typical use, it can suffice with supervision. And even minors are able to supervise its use. It doesn't take that much work to sit by the mortar and say, yeah, $10 an hour. Thank you for the $10. It's not that difficult. Even the minor sons could do that too. New subject. The Mishnah taught, if the adult sons said from the outset, see that which our father left behind, we are going to engage in business with our share of the property and profit from it. Well, then they enhance the property for themselves. They're not using the whole undivided estate. They're separating at least approximately how much they're going to inherit themselves, and they're investing that because they don't want to miss opportunities. The market is hot. They're not going to put at risk the portion of the estate that belongs to the minors, but they want to start working and investing with their portion of it. So we say, okay, they did that for their own account. The Gemara relates a story about this. Rav Safra's father left him dinars, right? He actually inherited cash from his father. Rav Safra, who was a great sage, took the dinars and entered into a business venture with them. And his brothers came and charged him in a court of law before Rava, claiming their share of the profits that Rav Safra had made by investing his portion of the estate. And Rava said to them, Rav Safra is a great man. He does not abandon his studies and toil for others. It is therefore clear that if he invested the money, it was for his own profit, even if he did not explicitly declare it at the outset. He didn't say, that which we inherited from our father, I'm taking my share and investing that for my own account. But he only took his share. It's not like he took all the money in the estate. He only took the amount that would be his share and he invested it. Some kind of a passive investment, probably an investment that came his way because he was a recognized great sage, and some wealthy guy wanted Rav Safra to have the opportunity to study Torah 18 hours a day, never leave the study hall. He was really that kind of a scholar, and said, Rabbi, give me some of that money. I'll, invest it alongside my money. I've got a caravan going down to, Egypt for silks and spices. It's pretty much a sure thing. And indeed, the investment did well. But Rav Safra, after he handed it over to this, trusted guy who's only giving him the opportunity because he's a great sage, he never thought about it or worried about it or did any work with it. He just handed it over. So in that case, even though he didn't say he's investing the portion of the estate that belongs to him for his own account, he doesn't need to, because it's obvious that he's just doing that so he can keep studying Torah all day long. And that's a different case than just a standard set of brothers where one of them should have declared he's taking his portion of the estate for his own account, rather than I'm investing a portion of our estate to see if we can make it grow. In the regular case of brothers, the guy would have to make that declaration. In the case where one of them is a Torah sage, under these kind of circumstances, he doesn't have to make that explicit declaration. New subject. The Mishnah teaches, with regard to a wife who enhanced the property of her deceased husband, she enhanced it so that the profit goes to the middle, meaning she shares that with the other heirs. And the Gemara asks, what is the deceased man's wife doing with the orphan's property? What rights does she have to the property? Right, we've seen that if a man dies and he leaves children and a wife, so the children inherit, the wife doesn't. Right? If there are children to inherit from the man, the wife doesn't inherit. She, according to Torah law, is not an heir. Now, he could give her money. He could make a will and bequeath to her or gift to her whatever he wants. But in the absence of a will, she doesn't inherit. However, the children who do inherit have an obligation to sustain the widow. So she's going to be okay. But at any rate, the question is being asked, why are you calling her somebody who's inheriting alongside other heirs? In what situation would that happen? What rights does she have to the property? And Rav Yirmiyah said, the Mishnah is referring to a wife who is an heiress, i.e. she is one of the heirs. For example, if she were the daughter of her husband's brother, right, meaning that her husband married his niece, which is permitted. It doesn't happen often, but it is permitted. So if a man married his niece, and then there were no other children, and his brother also died, so then actually his wife would be the heir, right? Because she is the daughter of his brother. In the absence of other heirs, his brother inherits. If his brother is now dead and the only surviving member of the next generation is the brother's daughter, then that she is the heir of this man's estate, and it's almost like a coincidence that she also happens to be his wife. That's why she would be an heiress in that situation. So the Gemara asks, well, isn't it obvious that the law in this case is the same as with regard to any other heir? Okay, well, she inherits as an heir. What difference does it make if she's a wife? Why does this need to be spelled out? And the Gemara replies, it is necessary to state this lest you say that since it is not a woman's way to toil to enhance property, right? Again, very patriarchal society that we're talking about 2,000 years ago. So women weren't very often running businesses. So then, even though she did not expressly state that she is toiling for herself, it is considered as though she had expressly stated this. The Mishnah teaches us that only if she expressly stated this do the profits accrue to her. So she's more like any set of brothers or joint heirs, where in order to make an investment of part of the estate to accrue for their own account, they have to make that declaration. She's not going to be considered like a Torah sage who doesn't need to make that declaration. Now, the Mishnah teaches, and if she said, see that which my husband left me, I am going to engage in business with my share and profit from it, and then she does in fact enhance the property for herself. Right now, it's considered that she did separate her portion of the estate. She invested that, and any profits that come from it accrue to her. Now, the Gemara asks, well, isn't that obvious? She made the declaration. Why would we need to state this? And the Gemara explains, it is necessary to state this lest you say that since it is praiseworthy for her to enhance the property on behalf of the orphans, as people will say, see how she toils for the orphans? She relinquishes her right to the profits, and they should divide them equally. The Mishnah teaches us that this is not the case. If she makes the declaration, the profits do accrue to her. Rabbi Hanina says, in the case of one who marries a woman to his eldest son and arranges the wedding feast in a house that he designated for the purpose of the wedding canopy and the wedding feast, the son acquires the house as a gift. It's like, wait, what? Oh, he's saying that, I rent, this like banquet hall where everyone is throwing weddings, and I make a big meal there for my son's wedding. I arrange the chuppah, right, the wedding canopy. We go through a beautiful, wonderful party. Everybody has a good time. Then at the end of the day, my son gets the banquet hall as his house. What? And the answer is no, because they did things differently in this society at that time, where it was much more common for somebody to build a new house for his son and and the son's new bride to occupy, right? And so if the guy builds a new house or purchases a new house and throws the wedding in it for the son and daughter, then the son and daughter-in-law, everyone's going to assume that that's what he's doing, right? That he's making the wedding party in the house that he bought for his son and daughter-in-law. And so in that situation, because that is the assumption, the son and his new bride do in fact get that house. And the Gemara notes, and this is the law specifically in the case of the eldest son, and specifically if he is marrying a virgin, right, a first-time wife, and specifically when this woman is his first wife, and specifically when the father married him off first among his sons. When all these conditions exist, it is presumed that the father has a particular fondness toward the son, due to which he gave him the house in which he arranged the wedding. Now, the Gemara clarifies the details of this law. It is obvious that if the father designated a house for the son's nuptials, and there is an upper story above the house, that the son acquired the house, but he did not acquire the upper story. If the father designated a house for the son, and there is a portico in front of the house, then what is the law? And if there were two houses, one within the other, and the inner one was designated for the son's nuptials, then what is the law? And the Gemara concludes, Taiku, these questions shall stand unresolved. Now the Gemara raises an objection from a Baraisa. If his father designated a house and furniture for his son's nuptials, the son acquired the furniture, but he did not acquire the house. Rabbi Yirmiyah says this is referring to a case where his father's storeroom was placed there. It is clear that just as his father did not intend to give him the storeroom, neither did he intend to give him the house. And the sages of Nehardea say, even if there is only a dovecote in the house that belongs to the father, the son does not acquire the house. And Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Papi say, even if there is only a pot of small fried fish, the son does not acquire the house. And Mar Zutra married off his son and hung a sandal in the house to indicate that he did not intend to give the house as a gift. And Rav Ashi married off his son and hung a jug, a shisha, of oil in the house. So what you see here is the whole premise of this group of laws here feels very unfamiliar to us because it's not so common in modern times, that your son gets married and you buy him a house. And that in that new house is where the wedding gets thrown. It's just very, we're sort of like struggling to catch up a little bit and get that picture painted in our minds of just what was kind of societal norms in this culture at that time. But I do think that the more universal takeaway is that so often people make assumptions about what other people know. Where you just cite a law or a joke or a teaching or some kind of a provision, a contract provision, and you just assume that the other people in the room know what you're talking about, or they assume that you're intending the same thing that they're hearing. And, everybody has different backgrounds, and these assumptions are often wrong. And people often think that they're agreeing with each other when they're totally miscommunicating, and that there's been an absence of clarity. Right? So when there's an absence of clarity, people can make assumptions, and what you don't want is that when the young couple is starting off their life together, that right at the outset, there's some kind of a misunderstanding where, one family thinks that, they're marrying off their daughter to this man who's, a man of means, and that his son and their daughter are going to have a nice wedding in their new home. Everyone, because that's what's normally done. And because they never had the conversation, and the father didn't communicate, no, this house I've already got it rented out for the coming year. It's a beautiful location to throw the wedding, but it's not my gift to the bride and groom. And that's going to cause all kinds of misunderstanding and argument and machlokas, right? Like, disputes right at the outset of the wedding. So much better to just be clear. Not only kind and well-intentioned, but clear. Mar Zutra says, these three matters were instituted by the sages as a halacha, as a law, without any explanation of their process, i.e., the sages instituted these enactments despite the fact that the mechanism by which they function is unclear. One is this law with regard to the son acquiring the house designated for his nuptials. Another is that which Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says. One who writes a deed granting all his property to his wife on his deathbed renders her only a steward of his property, i.e., he intends only to put her in charge of the property on behalf of the other heirs. That's what he meant to say, I'm putting it all in your charge, not I'm giving it all to you and disinheriting my children. Another is that which Rav says with regard to one who says to another, I have 100 dinars in your possession. give it to so-and-so. So if this occurred in the presence of all three parties, right? You owe me $100. Here's John standing with us. The three of us are together. I say, the $100 that you owe me, please give it to John. Okay? So in that situation, John has acquired the $100. You now owe it to John. You don't owe it to me anymore because all three of us are in the same room. As long as, we agree that you owe me $100, now I can assign that debt to John, and John has acquired it. You now owe it to John. I'm out of it. He doesn't have to make a kinyan, a formal act of acquisition. It's done. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 3. Now we're on page 144b, and we're starting Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 9. Mishnah 4. With regard to brothers who were also partners, and it occurred that one of them was summoned to public service, which is assessed per family. So he was summoned from the middle. In other words, the profits or expenses of his service are divided among them. If one of the brothers became sick and sought treatment, the cost of the treatment is paid from his own resources. That's the Mishnah. And so what's worth knowing here is that, particularly in Eretz Yisrael, which was under Roman occupation at the time, it would often happen that, there were prominent families, or families that were understood to have some influence and some means, in any particular town. And the Romans, they conquered so much territory that they really did not have the Roman manpower to install officials and functionaries at every level of government everywhere that they went. So what did they do? They would recruit locals and say, we're putting you in charge of this town. And what that means is that you have to collect taxes from the town, and we're going to come by once a year, and you need to pay up, 1,000 pieces of gold. So, is this a good position to be in? No, not at all. The family that is, that the guy who's chosen for that job hates to have that job. Or the Romans come and say, yeah, you're in charge. We're making you a general, and that means you have to get 1,000 men together and bring them as a legion in our army. Or we're putting you in charge. I mean, this is like, remember in Animal House? We're putting you're in charge of the pledge social committee, whatever it's called. What does that mean? It means you get to drive us to the supermarket so we can buy beer. Right? So beware of honors bestowed. But at any rate, and this would happen to some extent in the Persian Empire also, in the Jewish community in Bava. So the point is that people would be impressed into or pressed into government service, and it might end up costing them a lot of money to give the Roman or Persian authorities what they needed. It might also end up being an opportunity to make profit. Maybe you're going to be a tax collector, and the guy ends up being good at it, and he's able to give the government what it wants and keep something for himself. So the point here is that if the Romans or the Persians come along and say, we want one member of the Litvak family and one member of the Goldberg family and one member of the Levitt family for these jobs, then the family maybe chooses which guy is going to have to go and do that job, but whatever expenses he accrues or whatever profits he makes in that job are going to be divided up among the family, right? Divided among the brothers. On the other hand, if somebody got sick and sought treatment, let's say they had inherited a joint estate that hadn't been divided up yet. Well, if he's sick and he takes money out of the estate for his treatment, that's on his own account. The other brothers don't need to participate in paying for that. Okay, that's Mishnah 4. Now the Gemara. The sages taught this service mentioned in the Mishnah, this government service, is referring to forced imperial service. But if one of the brothers engaged in a trade of his own volition, well, then the profits and expenses are his alone. The sages taught in a Baraisa, in the case of one of the brothers who was appointed as a tax collector or a military commander, a position with the potential for profit, if he was appointed on account of all the brothers, right, the Romans said one member of this family come, then as the procedure was to impress a representative from each family for this purpose. So then any profit accrues to all the brothers. But if he was appointed on account of himself, the profit accrues to himself, right? The Romans came and said, we want one of the Litvak brothers to come work for us. Then all the Litvak brothers share the risk and the reward. But if the Romans come along and say, hey, John, well, I'm just going to make up a name. Hey, Tommy Litvak, we've heard that, you have some military prowess. We're making you a colonel of this legion where you stand to make some money when we go, invade and attack the enemy. Then Tommy Litvak gets those profits for himself. He doesn't have to divide that with his brothers. I think I do have a cousin Tommy in Chile. I want to just make up a name of someone I didn't know. Anyway, where am I? Okay, now the Gemara asks, isn't it obvious that if he was appointed on account of all the brothers, right? We said we want one of the Litvak brothers, then the profit accrues to all the brothers. That's obvious. Why does it need to be said? The Gemara responds, no, it's not obvious. It is necessary to state this law in a case where the brother appointed was sharper, i.e. more capable than the other brothers, lest you say that his sharpness caused him to be selected for the position and he should receive all the profits. The Brisa teaches us that his talent notwithstanding, since he was selected as a representative of the family, the profit accrues to all the brothers. The sages taught with regard to one of the brothers who took 200 dinars from the common inheritance to support himself when he went to another place to study Torah or to learn a trade, the brothers can say to him, listen, if you're here with us, then you're entitled to sustenance along with us. But if you're not here with us, you're not entitled to sustenance. Right? So the argument is, listen, if I'm living at home, it's going to cost the family from this joint estate that we inherited, $1,000 a month just to feed me and clothe me and give me gas money to go to and from school. That's just basic sustenance. And whether I'm living at home or I go to a yeshiva, 2 days ride away, what difference does it make? I'd be getting that $1,000 a month anyway. Why can't I use it to go learn in a yeshiva, that's a few towns away, a few days donkey ride away? And the other brothers can say, well, if you're here at home with us, we're 10 brothers. And so it's much cheaper, incremental cost of one more brother among 10 living in the house than to send one brother to go live by himself in that yeshiva that's a couple days ride away. So if you're home, you get sustenance. If you want to go do this more expensive lifestyle, that's on you. And the Gemara asks, but should they give him his sustenance wherever he is? In other words, okay, well, whatever it costs additional to have the extra mouth in the house, give him that so that he can at least have that much money and he can, augment it as needed or live in a much more frugal manner. But at least whatever it would cost for him to be living at home, now that he's not living at home, give him that money so that he can go study Torah somewhere else. And the Gemara answers, this ruling supports the opinion of Rav Huna. As Rav Huna says, the blessing of a house is in its abundance. And this means that the extent to which blessing permeates a home, the first argument is, listen, you have to sustain him. He has to live. So what difference does it make if he's living at home or living somewhere else? You still have to sustain him, even if it costs a little more. And the answer is no. This ruling supports the opinion of Rav Huna. As Rav Huna says, the blessing of the house is in its abundance. This means that the extent to which blessing permeates a home is proportionate to the number of people who live there. And when many people live together, the expenses per person decrease. So the Gemara asks, okay, but should they give him his sustenance according to the blessing of the house? I.e., whatever expenses he would incur, even if he were in the house, give him that so he can go learn Torah somewhere else. And the Gemara responds, indeed, they are required to provide for those expenses that he would incur in any event. So yes, he can get that. Whatever it would cost for him to be, to feed him while he's at home, just a little extra cost. If there's 10 brothers, he can get that little bit of money and go somewhere else. New subject, the Mishna teaches, if one of the brothers became sick and sought treatment, the cost of the treatment is paid from his own resources. Ravin sent a ruling in the name of Rabbi Ella. They taught this only in a case where he became ill through negligence. Ooh. Does that sound a little bit like victim blaming? I mean, the last thing somebody needs to hear when they're sick and, just going through whatever the illness is putting them through, hey, it's your fault that you're sick. I mean, nobody wants to hear that. There's no shortage of friends and relatives who will tell you why you're sick. Obviously, no one's going to do that if somebody's gravely ill. However, here they're talking about illness that can be avoided. And the reason you got it is because you're negligent. So what kind of illness can be avoided according to the Gemara? So they said they taught this only in a case where he became ill through negligence. But if he became ill through circumstances beyond his control, the cost of the treatment is paid from the middle, i.e. from the common inheritance. Very interesting. So as long as he wasn't negligent, then it's like the common inheritance is like a little bit of an insurance policy for all of the brothers, just like their parents would have sustained them no matter what illness they got. They can, use resources from the common inheritance to treat an illness that they contracted through circumstances beyond their control. So the Gemara asks, what are the circumstances in which an illness is considered negligence? And this is in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Hanina, as Rabbi Hanina says, all occurrences that befall man, like mankind, are in the hand of heaven. Everything that happens to us is in the hand of heaven, and we have to be thankful for the good and the bad, because even what looks bad now might turn out to be not so bad later. So we try to cultivate that attitude of gratitude about everything that happens to us, no matter how painful or difficult it might be when it's happening. So everything is in the hands of heaven, except, meaning this wasn't heaven sent you this illness, you did it to yourself. And what is that? Colds. If you catch a cold, it's your fault. Now, what does that mean? Obviously, there's contagious colds that you couldn't have known that somebody walked by you and sneezed on you before you even knew that they were there. How could you call that negligence? So that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is, did you go, walking through a cold river, get all your clothes wet because you were so anxious to get to the other side, and then walk about on a cold day with wet clothes, and you end up getting sick? They're talking about avoidable colds, right? So if you were negligent and you caught a cold because you didn't take care of yourself in some kind of common sense manner that everyone agreed, like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? So that was negligent. Of course, there are certain things where we're negligent with our health, and they're just talking about colds here. If you're smoking 2 packs a day of cigarettes and then you get sick from that, I mean, that was an unforced error, right? So everything is in the hands of heaven except for colds and obstacles. Obstacles, the word here is pachim, from which one is able to protect himself. As it is stated, cold and snares are on the path of the crooked. He who guards his soul shall keep far from them. Proverbs 22:5. Okay? So if you endanger yourself where anyone else could say, what are you doing? Why are you endangering yourself that way? That was unnecessary. That was an own goal, unforced error. If you put yourself in some kind of unnecessary danger and then you end up getting sick or injured or, broke or whatever, okay, heaven didn't do that to you. You did that to yourself. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 4. Now, Mishnah number 5 of chapter 9. It was common practice for friends of a groom to give him gifts in order to help cover the expenses of the wedding feast. These gifts are known as the gifts of the groomsmen and would be reciprocated in turn, right? Groups of friends would help each other pay for the wedding. And they would reciprocate. While the groom and the groomsmen were at times the recipient and giver of the gifts respectively, the gifts were at times provided by the father of the groomsman and received by the father of the groom. So it's common for these groomsmen to, help the groom pay for the wedding. There's a group of guys, and so, over the course of a few years, they're all going to get married, and each time one of them gets married, all of them chip in. But sometimes it's a group of young guys, and it's actually their fathers who are doing the chipping in as each of them gets married. Okay, so sometimes, wait a minute, right? Okay, effectively. While the gifts were sometimes provided by the father of the groomsmen and received by the father of the groom. Now, in the case of brothers, some of whom brought gifts of groomsmen in their father's lifetime, which were provided by their father, right, to their friends when they were getting married. So when the gifts of the groomsmen are reciprocated after the father's death, when one of the brothers gets married, they are reciprocated to the middle, i.e. the gift is divided among the brothers. And this is because gifts of the groomsmen are a legal debt owed to the father, and that is collectible in court. But with regard to one who sends his friend jugs of wine or jugs of oil, a reciprocal gift is not collectible in court because they are considered acts of kindness. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. And the Gemara raises a contradiction between the Mishnah's ruling that the gifts of groomsmen are reciprocated in the middle and the first clause of a Baraisa. If a father sent his son with gifts of groomsmen, when they are reciprocated, when that son gets married, they are reciprocated to that son. If his father was sent gifts of groomsmen for the wedding of one of his sons, when they reciprocated from the father's estate, they are reciprocated from the middle, i.e. from the undivided estate. Now, the Rabbi Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says, when we learn the Mishnah as well, we learned it as teaching the law with regard to gifts of groomsmen that were sent to the father for the wedding of his sons, not with regard to gifts of groomsmen sent by the father. It's getting a little bit in the weeds here, but we're seeing, right, we're making a distinction. Is there an obligation? First of all, when these groups, a group of guys, are helping each other pay for their weddings, is that just something that they've kind of informally, it fell out that way and they're all doing it? Or has it become a legal obligation? And if it's not a legal obligation, does it become a legal obligation when their fathers are stepping in and sending gifts to each other so that the different fathers can, help their sons get married? Now, the Gemara objects, but the Mishnah teaches the law with regard to brothers, some of whom brought gifts of groomsmen, right, help their buddies pay for their weddings. And the Gemara responds, amend the text of the Mishnah and teach it as saying, with regard to brothers, to some of whom gifts of groomsmen were brought. So the Gemara objects, but the Mishnah explicitly teaches the law if the gifts of groomsmen were reciprocated. And the Gemara responds, this is what the Mishnah is saying, when it is collected from the brothers in return, it is collected from the middle. Right? In other words, if now we have fathers that are stepping in and helping each other pay for their sons' weddings, okay, and then one of these fathers dies, so when, one of the other fathers sort of is going to reciprocate and send gifts back to that father so he can help one of his sons get married, is that an obligation that is owed to the estate, to that one brother? Does the estate now need to reciprocate and pay for somebody else, like the buddy of one of the brothers, when he's getting married? Does the estate have to help that guy? No, it's not so simple. Rabbi Asi says, even if the text of the Mishnah is not amended, it is not difficult, and it can be reconciled with the Baraisa. Here in the Mishnah, it is referring to where the father sent the gifts of groomsmen without specifying which son should be ascribed credit for bringing the gifts. There in the Baraisa, it is referring to where the father specified that the credit for the gifts of groomsmen should be ascribed to a specific son who receives gifts in return, as it is taught in a different Baraisa, if his father sent gifts of groomsmen on his account, meaning his son's behalf, then when the gift is reciprocated, it is reciprocated to that son. If his father sent gifts of groomsmen without specification, then when the gift is reciprocated, it is reciprocated to the middle, meaning divided among the sons. I'm very close to done for today. Questions or comments, please get them in now. And Shmuel says, here in the Mishnah, we are dealing with a man whose married brother died childless. So that's a yavam. So the son who brought the gifts of groomsmen died childless. His brother entered into levirate marriage, yibum, with the widow. And the gifts of groomsmen were reciprocated at the wedding of the yavam, the surviving brother. Although the yavam inherits the property of his brother, since the reciprocal gifts were not extant when his brother died, they do not belong solely to him. Rather, they are divided among the brothers. And this is because the yavam, the one who's marrying the widow, does not take in inheritance the property due to the deceased, as he does the property that the deceased already possessed. And the Gemara asks, is it possible to conclude by inference from Shmuel's statement that the other side, i.e. a friend who had received gifts of groomsmen from the deceased brother, is obligated to repay the gifts of groomsmen that he received from the deceased? Why should this be so? Let him say, give me my groomsmen, and I will rejoice with him. Since the one who gave him the gifts is deceased, he is not obligated to reciprocate. Right? If I can't rejoice with him, why should I pay? Isn't it taught in a baraisa with regard to similar circumstances in a place where people are accustomed to return the betrothal money when the betrothed man or woman dies, they return it. And in a place where people are accustomed not to return it, they do not return it. The customs of each locality. And Rav Yosef bar Abba says about Mar Ukva says that Shmuel says they taught this only with regard to when the woman dies, in which case one follows the local custom. But if the man dies, all agree that they do not return the money. And what is the reason for this? Since she can say, give me my husband and I will rejoice with him, i.e. it is not my fault that we are not getting married since he died. So she is not required to return the betrothal money. So here too, let him say, give me my groomsmen and I will rejoice with him. We'll knock off there at the top of page 145a. Okay, just a few questions. It definitely got confusing in this reciprocal gifts of the groomsmen. Let's see how we did. Tom, if the wife did a good job of enhancing her own property, perhaps the sons will want her to invest their money too, which certainly they can talk about and make happen. The question is simply if she took this action without specifying that she was doing it for her own account or for the undivided estate, and therefore on behalf of herself and the other heirs. Can she say that it was for her own account when it went well? No, because she didn't make that declaration. And if she did make the declaration, then they can say, hey, you made a lot of money, share it with us, because she said, no, I'm only putting at risk the portion of the estate that belongs to me. That's what I invested. That's what the profits came to, and that is for herself. Joseph asks, was being chosen to tax collect for Rome or Bavel considered as treasonous to Am Yisrael? I don't think it is included in the 3 things to be martyred for. Right. You don't have to say no, in the sense that the Romans will kill you if you don't do it. You're not, what are you doing as a tax collector, right? You're not murdering other people. You're not committing avodah zarah, idolatry, and you're not committing rape. So it's not something you have to be martyred for, as you're pointing out. Why would it be treasonous if you have no choice? Right? You have no choice. And in fact, what you would want is that somebody would accept the position who's going to be fair and not abuse that authority. So if the town has some say in who's going to get that job, they're going to pick the person they trust the most, which is unfortunate for him or her, but probably him, that he now has to go interact with that government, and the government's going to come down on him if he doesn't collect enough money, if he's just too kind to be able to collect enough. It's a really tough spot to be in, but I don't think it would have been considered treasonous to the nation of Israel. Sharon, the huppah, the wedding canopy, is itself is symbolic of a couple's new home. Is this connected to the concept of the place where they marry is their first home as well? I mean, I don't know, but it sounds right to me. Yeah, good point. Renee, with regard to blaming a sick person, I live with MS. You would not believe the dreck I have heard. Oh, Renee, I'm so sorry that you have to put up with that kind of dreck. And may you have whatever healing is possible for you and beyond, miraculous healing, may you have it. A refuah shlema. And at the very least, may you not have to listen to such dreck, right, as victim blaming people when they get sick. It's only things that are avoidable where this concept of negligence would come in. Sharon, the last question. My husband had polio as a toddler. My mother-in-law really beat herself up, feeling that any of their activities were at fault, like going on a family vacation to a lake. Oh, it's so sad and so difficult for a family to live with blaming itself that way. I don't really know much about polio. I know that eventually there was Dr. Salk's vaccine, but I don't think people knew what brought polio on. So, you know, I hope the family didn't suffer too much blaming itself. But, you know, it's just so difficult in these kinds of issues. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, Saturday. It's getting earlier and earlier. I think I can definitely, I will endeavor mightily to get on the air by 7 or even before 7 o'clock Pacific tomorrow night after Shabbos ends. May everybody be blessed with an uplifting, inspiring, rejuvenating, health-inducing Shabbos. All the best. Good Shabbos.